Hello and welcome to Sarat Chandra IAS Academy, where your dreams are our mission. This is Yatharth here, and today we are going to talk about food security and climate change. So let's see what all's there to discuss. All right. So this article I have taken from the Hindu, from an editorial. Just a second. Let me change the pen color. All right. So how to weather-proof the food security. So what we are talking, we are connecting three things. One is weather. Second thing we are connecting with this is food. And third thing we are connecting is security. Okay, so weather is related with climate. In the comment section, you can tell me what is the difference between the weather and climate. It's more related with the time duration. Okay, so let me know. All right, so we are talking about three things here. The weather, which is affected by the climate eventually. Then the food, which is affected by the weather. And the food security, which affects the people eventually. Society or people. Because it deals with our basic need, which is hunger. All right. So this is what we are going to talk about, how one thing makes a butterfly effect on the everything else. Okay. So the major terms here are inflation is coming down. We are talking about the inflation also. We'll see what is inflation. Inflation simply is a general rise in pricing. General rise in prices with time. So, but to account for the vagaries of the monsoon, policymakers must check the prices of cereal and milk. We are talking about the inflation mostly in the cereal and milk. So, we'll see the data related with this also. Okay, and we are talking about the monsoon as well. So, we'll see this year what is so special with the monsoon. Why are we talking about this and what can be the way forward? So, let's see the context. So, weather patterns including temperature, precipitation. What is precipitation? Rainfall. And extreme weather events, which are also known as, let's say, disasters, are critical factors in determining agricultural productivity and food security. So, changes in weather patterns can lead to crop failures. So, what are we seeing here? Changes in weather patterns, basically climate change. So, related topics are global warming and, let's say, treaties here or missions here. What is the India's net zero missions or whatever else you can read from here. So, please try to connect all these topics, whether they are from environment or geography. Okay, so changes in weather patterns can lead to crop failures. This is one issue. Food shortages, second issue created by the first issue, and price hikes. So, this is the third issue because we are living in a capitalist economy. So, which can have far reaching impacts on the livelihoods of millions of people around the world. Just a second. Okay. So, for examples, droughts and floods can destroy crops. So, this was one major thing we recently saw in the northeastern region last year. So, in the northeastern region, there were heavy floods and quite a lot of crops were destroyed. Even there was a loss of life and property. So, these also come in the disaster management. This also you can read, it's a related topic. Okay, so leading to food shortages and price spikes. What is spike? Spike means something which is going on an okay curve, suddenly changes the slope angle and goes like this, or even spikes, just spikes and does not come down so easily. All right. So with extreme temperatures can reduce crop yields and quality. So crops are essentially plants. And just like us, plants are made of protein, fats, carbohydrates, things like these. And they also work on hormones and enzymes. There are plant hormones also, there are plant enzymes also. So they work on these things and they require a certain temperature range to function, whether it is, let's say, 20 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius. And the output of these crops change or reduce like a bell curve. Let me show you just a second. Okay, like this. So let's say on the optimum temperature, they will give the max output. And on the both side of the curve, whether it is extremely positive temperature, extremely cold, so they will give the lowest output. Further than this, they will die off or wilt. Okay. So this is the issue here. These are the issues here. So these impacts are particularly acute in developing countries where many people depend on agriculture for their livelihoods and may lack access to alternative source of food and income. So we are still primarily dependent on the primary sector, although the growth of tertiary sector has been largest, the share of this has been largest also, but many people of our country are still dependent on the primary sector, and the whole world is essentially dependent on the primary sector because that is the only method for, let's say, all the humans to get food from the primary energy source, which is the sun. So through plants and crops and soil we get our energy, just like all other animals. So this is what is going to be harmed, is going to be threatened when the climate change gets real. It's still very real now, but it will worsen in the upcoming time. Okay, so we are talking about two different things here, that what is the way to deal with climate change. One thing is mitigation. Another thing is adaptation. So the mitigation is by countries which can afford to mitigate the climate change. Let's say they can reduce their fossil fuel consumption. They can change to renewables. All right. So this is for developed countries with high financing. So they can afford to do something about the climate change. But countries like India right now are not able to do so much. That's why we rely on the resilience or adaptation basically. So we will change things as per the climate change, or we will make the plans or policies which will lead to less damage with the extreme weather events. So this all is a part of that also. We are talking about weatherproofing the food security. So what policies we must take, how should we adapt to the climate change? Let's see that. So what is food security? So food security as defined by the UN Committee on World Food Security means that all people at all times have physical, social and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food. So please, whenever you are writing these type of quotes, you can say, or you can write like this, that UN Committee on World Food Security. What does it say? That people. So people of three, let's say, classifications, that all people at all times have physical, social and economic what access, and what kind of food they should have? Sufficient, safe and nutritious. All right, just a second. Okay, so food security is a combination of following three elements: food availability, access and food utilization. That means that meets their food preferences and dietary needs for an active and healthy life. So you should be able to utilize the food given to you as well. This is also an element. All right. So food security is closely related to household resources, disposable income. So this you can note down as the factors affecting the food security, which are household resources, disposable income, socioeconomic status. So it's also strongly interlinked with other issues such as food prices, global environment change, water, energy and agricultural growth. Let's see about the significance of the food security now. So let's see the significance of the food security. So it's required for boosting the agricultural sector. So this is what we talked about, the primary sector. So a boost is given by the food security. For having control on food prices, this is also required very much. Another thing is for economic growth and job creation leading to poverty reduction. So of course, if the primary sector is working fine, there will be more and more jobs created in the further sectors, whether it is secondary or tertiary, because logistics and services are always needed everywhere. So that's why it will lead to creation of more jobs and employment. For trade opportunities, so of course with employment, job, more production, it's all under trade. So there will be more trade also. For increased global security and stability. So this is most important thing here. It may look like the least important thing. So when we are talking about the global security and stability, that means in course when there is, let's say, at least as we saw the Russia-Ukraine war. So there was food security crisis in the Europe. Now this is the first thing. Because the Europe destabilized because of over-reliance on the other countries for its food imports. Even Sri Lanka. Or when we see the example of Pakistan right now, it doesn't have food because neither producing enough nor it has food security, and its imports all are also gone. It has low forex. Both of these countries. So they have taken loan from the IMF and all and World Bank. So what we are seeing here is for global security, for stability, regional stability. So we must be one of the countries, we are one of the countries, India, which is supplying food grains to even Afghanistan, which is sending, let's say, food to Turkey also. And there are many other countries which we are exporting rice, where we are exporting potatoes or wheat consignments. So this is all important for maintaining a regional stability and reliance on our country. Another thing is improved health and healthcare sector. So of course, if the nutrition is good, there will be lesser mothers and children going to the hospital in the initial few years. All right. Let's see what is the need for weatherproofing the food security. So one thing is the climate change is a crisis aggravator. So what we are seeing here, that it will just exacerbate things because of the climate change. The already exacerbated production of the soil because of the nutrient loss will even be more aggravated and threat multiplier for the most vulnerable among us. Its impact on the food production, livelihoods and health is expected to push an additional 600 million people into food insecurity. That means they will not have social, economic or other access to the good, safe and nutritious food. So by 2080, an increased child malnutrition. So this is also one of the things we are facing now. Even the high cases of TB and sickle cell anemia are because of this child malnutrition. About 80% of the global population is most at risk from crop failures and hunger from climate change. So they are in sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Asia and Southeast Asia, where farming families are disproportionately poor and vulnerable. A severe drought caused by an El Nino weather pattern. So El Nino we need to be really worried about because this year it's coming and it is going to be the year of El Nino. Or climate change can push millions more people into poverty. What are the impacts? Let us see the impacts. So one impact is on crop yield and production. So I already told you because of the temperature. Then water. Just a second. Let me explain to you it in a better way. Okay, so climate change variously divide things into two extremes. One is more than necessary. Second is less than necessary. So what happens more than necessary is the temperature sometimes. Second thing is warming or pollution. More sunlight available to plants because of the more temperature also. More lesser water, lesser clouds. Alright, so it will reduce the water also in the environment and soil. It will reduce the nutrition in the soil. It may bring floods. It may bring droughts also. Alright, so these things can happen, all these things can happen. And this will of course affect crop yield and production. Okay, altered suitability of regions for agriculture. So this is also one of the most important things. So when we talk about India, assume this is India. When we talk about India, there are various different crops. There are various different soils. There are various different temperature ranges and precipitation in various different regions of India. And there is a special phenomena called monsoon also observed here in our country. So there are few crops that grow good in certain regions, such as let's say cotton is growing in Maharashtra, Textile industries are focused on this region and Gujarat region. There is sugarcane industry in Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra, but not in Rajasthan because of the temperature variation observed here. So this crop is not suitable to be grown in Rajasthan, or let's say you cannot grow sugarcane in Jammu and Kashmir. All right. So if the climate change takes place, it will change everything, even the suitability of regions for certain kind of agricultures. One more thing is shifting pattern of agriculture as per climate change. So as slowly the climate change takes over, we'll have to shift the technologies. In the past also, we started greenhouse gas technology so as to concentrate the carbon dioxide and increase the production in C3 plants. All right. So various different technologies may have to be adapted. There are many countries which are still doing the artificial rain. Israel was one of these countries, one of the first and foremost countries. So artificial rain will become a technology in the India also in future. All right. Other things are ocean acidification. So this is one thing. With the climate change, CO2 will increase. CO2 in the oceans will increase, and it will be ocean acidification. So the biodiversity will also be lost in the oceans. So there will be more food insecurity because the marine life will not be present much more in the amount it is right now. So it will cause food insecurity for the coastal people. All right. One more thing is livestock and fisheries damage. So fisheries, we have already seen how they will be damaged. And in the middle portion, central Indian portion, other portions, livestock will also feel or meet the similar fate. So they will be damaged, more diseases will be there, more deaths will be there among them. Okay. One more thing is extreme weather events will cause logistics issue. So let's say there is flood somewhere, there is forest fire somewhere. So these will of course stop the transportation. All right. One more thing is price volatility. So if this everything is good, then the prices are stable, going through a natural rate of inflation. But suddenly, let's say there is any climate change event, so this will spike because we will not be able to find food as much as readily as it was available here. Other things are land degradation. So land degradation is itself a big topic. You can read about it. So it encompasses everything, whether it's land nutrition, the land's fertility. So land will degrade with the climate change, and it will affect the food security, directly affects the cropping. Another thing is water scarcity. So this we have already seen that the water will be more scarce, whether as a form of precipitation or in the form of groundwater. With the climate change, rains will be heavier, but for shorter duration. The temperatures will be higher, and there will be widespread damage to the primary sector. And through the primary sector, there will be widespread damage to the secondary and eventually to the tertiary sectors. All right. So let's see the food inflation control also. Some data I mentioned in the beginning of the lecture. Just a second. So this is some data which you can write in the beginning of your answer. So the food and beverages component in Indian CPI has a weightage of 45.86%, which is the highest among the G20 countries. And managing this component to around 4% is critical to taming overall inflation. This component of inflation cannot be managed only through monetary policies or even by the fiscal policies. The simple reason is that it is often triggered by external shocks, such as droughts and breakdown of supply chains and logistics. For instance, during the COVID pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict very recently. So this can be a topic in this year also. So one more thing we talked about is El Nino, which is coming this year. So you can read about it separately. I have already made a video on this, but let us again see here in a short manner. So El Nino is a naturally occurring climate change pattern associated with the warming of the ocean surface temperature in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. So please remember this. It occurs on average every 2 to 7 years, and episodes usually last 9 to 12 months. So El Nino affects the sea surface temperature in the Pacific Ocean. Please again and again remember it's not in the Atlantic Ocean. Because of the Southern America, it may seem like it's in the Atlantic, but it's this side, so please, it's Pacific Ocean. Okay, so which can weaken the monsoon or trade winds. and decrease rainfall over India, but a positive Indian Ocean dipole can offset this effect. Okay, so this is the picture of the El Nino. This is supposed to come this year. Okay, last few years we had the effect of La Nina, which is the opposite of this. So this is a normal year. The winds are blowing this side westwards. They are the western winds and they are blowing normally. Alright, here it's cold water on the shore of South American coast. Okay, Peruvian coast basically. And here it's little warm, good monsoon. So equatorial winds gather a warm water pool towards the west, towards Australia. But in the El Nino year, what happens? This thing reverses. And these winds are not very strong and the warm water goes this side. So it's a loss of fishing here also. Because cold water is good for fishes. Upwelling also doesn't happen much. Alright, and there is a loss of monsoon here also. But the rains are heavy this side now. Alright. So this can happen in the El Nino period. So let's see what it may do this year. So it's a looming danger. It's feared that it could cause below normal rainfall. So this is the single and most effective manner to explain the causes of, the effects of El Nino. So it will just lessen the rainfall. Okay. Cereal inflation, there is some data. So overall cereal inflation, product inflation is still at very uncomfortable level, 13.7%. So quite a high inflation. Rice inflation also, it's 11.4%. So it's biggest crop of the Kharif season. Please read about the agricultural seasons, whether they are Rabi, Kharif, Zaid, anything. Okay. Another thing is wheat inflation. So it's on 15.5%. It's also very high. Okay. One thing is milk inflation. It's 8% about in the last month. But since it has the highest weight among the 299 commodities that comprise of CPI, it's contributed to CPI inflation at a price of almost 12%, the highest among all commodities. So earlier we could see the prices of milk were around 35 to 40 rupees a kg. Now it is going 50 rupees a kg. Alright, and even more. So fodder price inflation. So fodder price inflation has been very high. So ultimately fodder is crop only. The crop residue is fodder. So between 20 to 30% in recent months has further exaggerated the milk inflation. All right. Okay. So how can fodder exaggerate the milk inflation? So fodder goes to the animal. Fodder is the animal's food. Which will eventually provide the milk. All right. So what's the way forward here? The first thing is the buffer stocking policy. So Indian government can release some rice in the market, which has already in the stocks. So FCI has more than 3 times the buffer stock norms for the rice. If the government wants to tame rice inflation, it can unload rice from the central pool in open market and easily bring down the rice inflation to around 4%. Another thing is wheat procurement policy. It has sufficiently good to meet the requirements of the public PDS system and give some room for open market operations. Another thing is lower import duties on fat. The policy instrument to use is to lower import duties on fat, which are currently at 40%, and skimmed milk powder, which is as 60%. So this is also a major cause of inflation. High import duties basically. So increased prices of SMP and fat are much higher than the global prices, and therefore by reducing import duties to say 10 to 15%, there would be some imports on fat and SMP. So that could help in reining in milk production prices. Another thing is address the challenge of fodder price inflation. So cultivation of fodder crops must be promoted through subsidy or incentive programs. So this will eventually help the milk inflation also. Fodder banks and crop combinations. So this can help. Be prepared for drought. So this is the one thing I talked about. It is adaptation. So drought resilience program, disaster resilience program. So it's the specialty of India. So this must be as per the policies and as per the latest guidance of IMD for the El Nino year. So policy interventions we need, drought tolerant crop varieties. So we are depending on millets now. We are shifting to millets eventually. This is the year of the millets also. So they are also an adaptation policy towards the climate change. Expanding irrigation facilities, restricting rice exports, storing and distributing grains, expanding social protection coverages. So these also can act as a way forward. All right. So this was the lecture for today. It's Yatharth here signing off. I hope you learnt a lot. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you and have a very good day ahead.